Welcome to the Hotel News Now Podcast Network. I'm senior reporter Dana Miller, and I'm very excited for today's episode. We're going to jump into a topic we haven't yet really covered on the podcast network, but something that I think every hotel and hotelier really thinks about on the daily, and that topic is design and architecture. In today's environment, hospitality designers are always looking for ways for hotels to be more sustainable, incorporate wellness, technology, and a bunch of other buzzwords through design. So for an expert source today, we have Lisa Haude. She's Senior Vice President and Director of Interior Design at LK Interiors. Welcome to the podcast, Lisa.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Good. Well, to start off, just for our listeners to get a little idea of who you are and what you do, can you tell us a bit about LKI and really, the types of projects that your firm specializes in?
LK Interiors is an interior design studio based here in Wichita, Kansas. We're nationally recognized for our expertise in creating authentic hospitality interiors and experiences. We're known for doing crafted lifestyle boutique properties and luxury resorts and hotels and unique branded and non-branded properties. We lead with storytelling. We love innovation. We're also very committed to being very authentic to the locations that we design in. So we want to create a great experience for the guests and the end user that truly is seamless to the way we live today. That's what we do.
That's great. And I love that you have a variety in the portfolio. Like you said, some boutiques and then also some bigger, branded and resorts. So that's good. We'll get a whole scope of things that you guys have worked on. But how would you really describe the feel of design and architecture as we transition away from 2023 into what we're kind of seeing now, if there is much of a shift at all?
I think it's been gradually shifting, and it's going to be probably seen more moving forward into 24. Everything is very much authentic. We're embracing the locations. We're embracing that style of the unique area that you're in. People want to experience that. And also, I think there's a big emphasis on nature. We truly want to have something that brings the outside in. We have more rooftop experiences and outdoor gardens and places where people can gather. And I think the other big trend that we're starting to see, and it really is impactful, is creating spaces that are even more flowing and allow a guest to be seamless, whether they're there for leisure or for work or just however they're going to be using the space. It's very adaptable to how we need to use the locations for what's best for us and how we're working in today's environment.
Right. And I think that really speaks well to just how travelers are traveling these days. Like, we've seen the bleisure, so we see them, mixing their vacations with their business trips and needing to kind of utilize different parts of the hotel for different aspects of their day. So I like how you mentioned that it's really just adaptable and meeting the needs of what these customers need today. Again, based on how travelers are choosing to utilize and interact with, public spaces and guest rooms now, can you share with us how you might approach the refresh of these spaces in a hotel to really best meet the needs of these customers? We've seen the remote working be a big trend in hotels, so curious what you're seeing on that front as well.
We're really kind of adapting spaces. So the idea of just having a lobby that's just a lobby is kind of going away. It's becoming a much more open environment. It's becoming more adaptable, truly creating zones that are communal, that are individual, that are quiet, where you can sit there and work independently by yourself for a few hours, or you could be with somebody else in a small meeting or even a larger group if you're there, for casual purposes, right? But I think there's more authentic thought process in how we're designing these spaces to truly kind of reflect that environment, and the lobby or the public space now becomes more of a 24/7 zone versus it was just the transition space you went through before you went to the pre-function or a meeting room or a boardroom. It's, we're becoming much more fluid with how we use our spaces.
I think a whole podcast in itself on just lobby design is something that, could be talked about because we've just seen such an evolution, right? Like before it used to be just the desk, like you said, you do your check-in process and then you go to the other zones of the hotel. But like, staying at a Moxie, their check-in desk is also like a bar. So it's really just more that social aspect. So it's interesting to see the evolution. And it sounds like it's becoming more of the latter, where it's more just a communal space and
Mhm.
having different, activations within it, and not just the, hi, my name is Dana Miller, I'm checking in for 2 nights, and that's it.
And I think people too, like you said, we're also still blending a little bit of that work environment. And a lot of people are still using public spaces now as part of their work environment. So they're having meetings, they're having interviews, they're having functions where they need to use it. So we really have to think about that. We have to think about the technology that's being introduced and how we adapt for that. And again, just how people are using that space and
Yeah,
truly, I think that's going to be a bigger trend that's going to continue to kind of grow and evolve. And
yeah.
even in renovation work, we're going to have to be more creative with how we adapt to make some of our older boxes work in more of this newer environment.
To kind of give our listeners some, like real practical advice on maybe how to design these different zones, like, do you have any standout examples in your mind that are like, okay, this works well for a public space to have a little section for someone to hold a private business call, but then over here it's more of like a communal space? Can you speak to any of those examples?
Right. So we actually have a property in construction now in Colorado, and we've done that with the lobby. We've created zones that are very public. We've created zones that are very private. We've created even little individual pods where you can go almost like a little phone booth and you can go sit in
Yeah.
there and it's nice and quiet. Or there's smaller little meeting spaces that are kind of tucked within the lobby proper where you could go in and have a small meeting with 3 or 4 people in that space. And it's still open. It's still in the open environment, but it might be somewhat private with some screening or some
Mhm.
glass doors or something. But we're adapting, and that's an older property that we're renovating to meet current needs.
Right.
And, you know, where the social zone becomes bigger and there is a bigger influx on F&B and how that's incorporated in. Because again, if you're going to be sitting there for a period of time, you want to be able to get your coffee or get your snack,
Mhm.
or as it transitions into social time, they can go into a social zone. So it's again that adaptation of how do we take these elements of how we're trending and how we're working or living in today's environment, and how do we adapt these spaces, whether they're old or new, doesn't matter.
Mhm.
We can still make it work.
Yeah, that's such a it's cool to see, obviously from pandemic years, so much of the focus on design was spreading out and making sure
Mhm.
people were, distance and whatnot. And now it's cool to see that everything's kind of coming back together where that socialization is the key focus now. So that's
Right.
good to hear that we've advanced in that sense. But um, so back to kind of my original list of questions, is there one word, phrase, or sentence that you feel will best set the scene or tone for the design trends we might see across the industry this year?
I would say organic. I think there's a big push for natural organic elements, things that give a sense of balance and harmony that still connect us to the outside, but still brings it inside. It feels very authentic. Um, I think that's a great way to kind of phrase the direction we're all heading.
Hmm. How about some things trend wise that we might not see this year going forward?
I think the days of the very monochromatic design scheme or color is kind of going away. I think and what I'm seeing even from vendors is that, yes, you still have a neutral base, but we're infusing now things like color and texture and heavier patterns and three-dimensional art and things that are far more um, exciting. It's not all
Hmm.
just the neutral box anymore. So that's really exciting to see moving forward versus what we've kind of had for the last couple of years of the safe zone.
Right. Do you think there's a bit of psychology to that where it's like, okay, we're out of pandemic, we're excited, we're, gonna be a little bit more lively with our everyday life, so maybe that has something to play with like more vibrant colors or more patterns or something?
It probably does to some
Yeah.
extent. And I think too that there's just this pent up desire just to travel, to be out, to experience,
Mhm.
whether it's for work or pleasure or whatever. And I think that's also probably driving some of that element, right? Where you
Mhm.
just really want to embrace your location, which goes back to, again, why we believe so strongly in storytelling. And it's that authentic ability to embrace where you're at. And it's not like I'm just anywhere USA. I'm
Right.
in Seattle or I'm in Colorado. Um, you're seeing those pieces and it's a nice connection.
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest things I always remember when I do work travel is when I, visit these awesome cities, but the hotel I'm in, it's like I don't even realize I'm not in Cleveland, Ohio anymore, where, I'm located. I can't believe I'm actually in San Francisco, It's like I want to feel like I'm actually in the city that I'm staying in. So I love, embracing that locale piece
Mm-hmm.
of it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So we've talked so much about trends. I'm curious, like how much your firm specifically lets trends influence how you're going to go about design and architecture. Do you feel like it's something that really dictates, or do you kind of like be a free spirit and do what you feel is best?
I think it depends on what we're doing. I think that the trend of being very authentic with creating spaces that are flexible and meeting today's needs for a guest, that's a natural trend we're going to follow and want to follow, especially as people as design and architecture. We want to make sure that we're incorporating it so that you truly are utilizing the space the best. But any item that I'm going to call quote unquote trendy, which is something
Yeah.
that's maybe just unique for right this second, kind of like the little
Mm-hmm.
fashion pop you would buy at the store, we're going to be careful with those kind of pieces. And just letting that kind of be a one-off or a few pieces here and there, but it's something that could be easily removed when the life cycle or the trend is
Mm-hmm.
over. But the bones to the building, the bones to the space and the architecture and the design is there, and it's
Mm-hmm.
fluid and it's timeless. Those are things that are harder to change, and you don't want to have to
Right.
change 15,
Right.
20, 25 years.
Yeah. So having that longevity and then sprinkling in a little bit of, fast
Mhm.
fashion with in the spaces.
Right.
Okay, that
Right.
makes sense.
It's like the little black dress with the fun little pop, right? You get to have
Yeah.
something that adds a little bit of spark to it, but it can
Yeah.
easily be moved on and transported
Uh-huh.
out when it's necessary for it to go.
And then maybe in a few years it'll come right back. So who knows?
Exactly. So maybe put it in the closet and pull it back out in
Yeah,
about 20 years.
absolutely.
Yep.
So we saw a huge push from the brands for owners to, of course, complete property improvement plans in the past few years. Just curious whether it's a project that your team has had a hand in or ones you've seen from others. What did a majority of these PIPs consist of? And can we expect to see more of these PIPs this year?
The tips that we've seen so far come across are all encompassing. It truly is reimagining spaces and doing all the things that we've talked about with the trends that are coming forward. There really is a push to really be what's best for the guest and how do we incorporate today's lifestyle in these properties. So I think that's definitely going to keep moving forward. Incorporating technology is really important as
Mm-hmm.
well, because again, guests need to have the freedom to work, whether they're in their room or they're in the public space. And we all have lots of devices that need to be plugged in. So we want to make sure that we're encompassing that as well. And I really think it's just going to keep continuing. We're going to keep seeing that into this year. Owners and developers are really excited and wanting to provide updated products.
Yeah.
And we as humans or people in general, we just have this insatiable need to want and desire to travel. So
Mm-hmm.
there's going to be a push to kind of keep moving forward and keep doing these things. And I think too, to some extent, there's still some backlog, I think, from all the years that we had through the pandemic where things got slowed down. So there's still lots of work out there that needs to happen and should be happening. So hopefully we'll continue to keep seeing that progress forward
Yep.
as we go into 24 and further in 25 and 26.
Absolutely. So you mentioned, technology, sustainability. Can you speak to how we might see more of that blended in? Like, do you feel like we'll see a big quote unquote sustainable makeover occur in the near term? Because that is such a big topic that consumers and brands and owners are so focused on because I know that's what the consumers are wanting. The Gen Z, that's the top of their mind. So do you think that we'll see kind of a wave of that?
I think we already are to some extent. I think we as designers, I know my team, we're very conscious about what we're selecting and why we're selecting the pieces that we
Right.
do. making sure there's sustainability, or what is the life cycle of that piece, or where is it even coming from? How is it impacting the carbon footprints?
Hmm.
Uh, but to some extent, some of it's an operations thing, just even how the property is running is going to affect that, not just the selections of things we're putting in. But
Hmm.
I think that as time moves forward, we're going to continue to see more evolution in products, better ways for us to adapt our buildings to meet current climate issues and problems that
Yeah.
pop up. Technology is another big one. I mean, that's constantly evolving and changing, but we're probably going to see more and more things like the Alexa or equal type devices being utilized in rooms, making sure we have furniture or product that's designed that can accommodate all the different types of USB, lightning,
Yeah.
etc., that we all need to
Hmm.
plug into, right, to make
Right.
all our devices work.
Right.
So I think we're just going to keep seeing that, and it's going to continue to evolve. And we as designers have to just be flexible a little bit and
Hmm.
forward thinking on how we're adjusting for all of that as well in the space.
Right. I'm sure that takes a bit of a balance of between, setting some strategies, but also being a little bit quick moving to make sure that you're, hitting the right quote unquote trends that you need to include. And, you know,
And it's really challenging a little bit too in some of these adaptive reuse buildings or even renovations, right? Because you're
hmm
limited by what your constraints are. So then it
sure.
causes us to have to be a little bit more creative sometimes on how do we adapt and adjust for
Hmm.
all of that.
For sure. And thinking of, spas and whatnot, we've seen so many reports that wellness tourism is just booming, right? So how can wellness influence hotel design in 2024?
There's a lot of thought being put into green spaces or incorporating, you know, bigger amounts of light coming in. Light's huge. Obviously, we all want to have that. Natural light, organic elements, anything that gives your mind and spirit some rest and some ability to
Hmm.
kind of breathe a little bit. And we're seeing more and more of that coming in. And of course, we want to incorporate that in when we can from a design standpoint, too.
Yeah, absolutely. And going a little bit back to how the local community is important to where the hotel is set in. I was curious if you can speak a little bit about that and whether you can kind of pull in also local materials to kind of bring that sense of community also in more, or how do you guys go about that?
Well, first, we do a very thorough, detailed research of the space. Physically, we go there, we kind of get boots on the ground and understand what we're dealing with. But we also do a lot of authentic, hardcore research. And
Hmm.
it's important that we incorporate that into that design. And so those elements could be as simple as it's something that inspires us. So color or elements can inspire selections that we're making. But then there's also times when we want to add that authenticity from that locale, whether it's local artifacts that get incorporated, it could be local wood, it could be, even something that's very specific to a location. So, for example, we
Hmm.
did a property in Austin, a bar renovation, and there's this one element that's just in Austin. And so we incorporated it into the hotel, into the design. The mural and everything is all based off of it because
Wow.
it's specific to that region.
Yeah.
And, so that's something that's unique, and that's something you're only going to see in that property. Uh, Another property we did in Napa, we infused the modern Napa feel, and what influenced that was the color of the wine influenced the colors that we picked, the Bordeaux's, the rosés, the
Hmm.
deep, rich tones and jewel tones, etc. That was part of the influence behind some of that. So as a designer, we're constantly inspired.
Hmm.
And again, when you kind of go dig into a culture, you get further inspired, and then that sparks ideas. And
Yeah.
somehow that all kind of creates the whole story to that property that's just fun and unique to it to make it that one of a kind, authentic scenario.
That's exactly it. It goes right back to the storytelling that you were mentioning earlier. Do you ever
Yeah.
get inspiration and creativity block? Or do you feel like because there's so much that you can pull from nature, from, social media, that there's always just kind of like an overload of ideas coming to you?
I think there's always constant overload going on in my mind for sure.
Yeah.
There have been a few properties that, you know, you've got some slim pickings to work with. And so
Yeah.
sometimes you have to dig a little deeper and figure it out. And again, some of those are far and few between because you can always find inspiration in
Yeah.
something. Or sometimes, and you're in certain areas, there's so many properties, you have to still make it a one of a kind, unique
Yeah.
experience, right? Because think about New York and how many properties you have
Right.
there. And everyone's going to automatically assume it's this one thought process
Mhm.
when we want to kind of still go outside the box a little bit. So sometimes those can be a bit more challenging to think
Yeah.
through, but somehow we always make it happen.
Good, good.
Yeah.
So speaking to that, I guess what's one design element or trend you were most excited about seeing within the hospitality industry this year?
I would say color. It's so
Yeah.
exciting to see color coming back, and it's not just all gray and neutral.
Right.
There's this big infusion of jewel tones, the deep, rich indigo blues, the sapphires, the emerald greens. It's just really exciting to see that and then being able to incorporate it and having clients actually be excited about incorporating
Right.
those colors and wanting to jump out a little bit and use some of those colors. And
Mhm.
again, depending on what the color is, it might just be that simple little accessory or
Yep.
a pillow or something, but we at least get to infuse it and the bones are there, but it's just really fun to see that. And then it ties in that culture, it ties in that locale. And it's just, I don't know, I'm excited to have color again. It's just really fun to work with it.
Good. And how does maybe like Pantone's color of the year or the other institutes that put out their color forecasts, how does that impact design for you?
It does impact us to some extent. So
Okay.
Pantone's color Peach Fuzz, is
Mhm.
nice and warm and cozy, light and airy, but it's also just a great neutral, right? So
Right.
it's a great base to work off
Yeah.
of as a base. And then it works so beautifully with so many other great, more saturated tones that I think it just becomes that new balance. Uh, Again, I think as much as we all love the grays and the whites and the neutrals, at least for me as a designer and even for my team, we're excited to kind of jump a little bit further out now.
Yeah.
So it's fun to kind of see these trends and how they're evolving and ebb and flow a little bit more.
Mhm. Good. I think some good words to kind of summarize this whole conversation is balance and color and seamless transition between spaces, indoor, outdoor, and a lot of good stuff there. But Lisa, is there anything else you want to mention before we wrap this up?
Well, again, I thank you for your time and it was a lot of fun. Always fun to chat with you. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Want more of the latest news and insights from across the global hotel industry? Head to hotelnewsnow.com for up-to-the-minute breaking news and subscribe to the new Hotel News Now podcast to hear directly from industry leaders. Available on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you find podcasts.
This episode of the Hotel News Now podcast network was recorded by Dana Miller on January 22nd, 2024, and edited by Rachel Daub. Check Hotel News Now for the latest hospitality industry news.